The smell hit me first, as it always did with Unit 34B, a cloying mixture of old cardboard, dust, and the faint, unsettling sweetness of decaying paper. It was the scent of forgotten things, of memories packed away and left to slowly disintegrate. Sarah had been on my case for months to clear it out. "It's a money pit, Tom," she'd said, not unkindly, but with that firm edge that meant the discussion was, for all intents and purposes, over. "We're paying for stuff we haven't looked at in a decade. Either it's trash, or it needs to find a home that isn't a 10 by 15 metal box." She was right, of course. She usually was. So there I stood on a miserably damp Saturday morning, the kind where the drizzle never quite committed to being rain but ensured everything felt clammy and unpleasant. The roll-up door of Unit 34B groaned in protest as I heaved it upwards, revealing the familiar archaeology of our past life. Stacks of boxes labeled with fading marker, old furniture draped in dusty sheets, the ghostly outlines of bicycles, and a defunct lawnmower. It was a monument to procrastination. I'd brought the essentials: work gloves, a heavy-duty flashlight, a couple of empty crates for sorting, and a small, battered portable television with a built-in VHS player. The plan was to triage, keep, donate, trash. Some of these boxes contained old photo albums and, more pertinently to the portable television, a trove of home videos. Sarah wanted to digitize anything important before the tapes degraded completely. It was a task I'd approached with the same enthusiasm I reserve for root canals. The first few hours were a blur of dust and decisions. Old college textbooks, trash. A box of Sarah's grandmother's china, keep, carefully. My own collection of 80s action figures, still in their original packaging. A moment of internal debate, then, reluctantly, donate. My son, Ben, was too old for them, and Emily, my daughter, was deep into her own world of digital art and fantasy novels. It was sometime after lunch, a lukewarm sandwich eaten while perched on an upturned bucket, that I found them. Tucked away in the far corner, beneath a moth-eaten woolen blanket, was a sturdy plastic container, unlabeled. Curious, I dragged it out. Inside, nestled amongst bubble wrap, were at least 24 VHS tapes, most of them in plain white cardboard sleeves. Some had neat, printed labels: Emily's first steps, Ben's 5th birthday, Christmas 1998, standard family fare. But then I picked one up that was different. The label was handwritten, in blocky, unfamiliar capitals, using a black marker that had bled slightly into the paper. It simply read, October 15, morning. I frowned. I checked my phone. Today was October 14th, a Sunday. Tomorrow, then, would be Monday, October 15th. A flicker of something, too quick to name, went through me. Probably just an old tape I'd mislabeled years ago, or maybe one Sarah had intended to record over and had just jotted a potential future date on. Still, the handwriting wasn't mine, nor did it look like Sarah's. I set it aside and continued sorting, but my mind kept snagging on that date. It was a small, insistent itch. After another 20 minutes of wrestling with a box of tangled Christmas lights that seemed to have actively conspired to become a single Gordian knot, I gave in. I pulled out the portable television, plugged its adapter into the outlet near the storage unit's main office, a courtesy they extended for such tasks, and popped the October 15 morning tape into the slot. The machine whirred, clicked, and then the small, flickering screen came to life. Static, then a burst of color. It was our kitchen, my kitchen. Sunlight, a little hazy, streamed through the window over the sink, illuminating floating dust motes. The angle was slightly high, as if filmed from the top of the refrigerator, a common perch for our old camcorder when we wanted to capture candid family moments without someone having to hold it. And there was Sarah. She was at the counter, pouring cereal into a bowl, Ben's favorite, rainbow loops. She was wearing her blue silk robe, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. Her hair was still damp from a shower. She looked exactly as she always did on a weekday morning. Then Ben, all tousled hair and sleep-creased cheek, wandered in, rubbing his eyes. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, his voice still thick with sleep. "Morning, sweetie," Sarah said, her voice clear, unmistakable. "Milk in the fridge." My heart began to beat a little faster. This was uncanny. It wasn't just like our kitchen, our family. It was them. But the date on the tape. Emily came in next, already dressed for school in her usual jeans and a band t-shirt, headphones draped around her neck. "Is Dad making coffee?" she asked, peering into the empty coffee pot. "He's running late," Sarah replied, glancing at the clock on the microwave. "Said he had an early meeting he forgot about. He'll grab something on the way." I froze. I didn't have an early meeting tomorrow. I had a dentist appointment at 10, then a relatively clear afternoon. This was wrong. All of it. The tape said tomorrow. What I was watching felt utterly, chillingly real, yet it depicted events that hadn't occurred. I paused the tape, the image of Emily reaching for the orange juice juddering on the small screen. My hand was trembling slightly as I pulled out my phone again. October 14th, Sunday. The video was clear, the quality surprisingly good for an old VHS tape, almost too good. There was no flicker, no tracking issues. It was as if it had been recorded yesterday. Or rather, tomorrow. A cold knot formed in my stomach. This had to be some kind of elaborate mistake. Maybe Sarah had filmed this earlier in the week, and I'd just forgotten, and the label was a coincidence, a misremembered date. But she'd mentioned me having an early meeting I knew nothing about. And Ben was eating Rainbow Loops, which we'd run out of last Thursday. I'd specifically bought his backup cereal, the boring oat flakes, on Friday. I pressed play again. The scene continued. They ate breakfast. The conversation was mundane, typical. Emily complained about an upcoming history test. Ben talked excitedly about a friend's birthday party next weekend. Sarah reminded them to clear their dishes. It was achingly normal. So normal, it was terrifying, given the context. Then, on the small television in the corner of their kitchen nook, our television, the local morning news was playing. I leaned closer to my little portable screen. The news anchor was talking about a minor traffic pileup on the Crosstown Expressway due to an overturned produce truck. "Authorities expect delays for the next few hours," she chirped. I snatched my phone and quickly searched for local news. Nothing about a produce truck on the crosstown, of course not. It hadn't happened yet, if this tape was to be believed. My breath hitched. This wasn't a mislabeled old recording. This wasn't a prank. The details were too precise, too layered. The cereal, my supposed meeting, the yet-to-occur traffic accident. I ejected the tape, my fingers fumbling. I looked back into the plastic container. There were more, many more. I picked up another one. Handwritten label, same blocky capitals, October 15, noon, and another, October 15, afternoon, and another, October 15, evening. My gaze fell upon one near the bottom. The writing was slightly more agitated, the marker pressed harder into the cardboard. October 15, night. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I felt the clammy air of the storage unit pressing in, the smell of dust suddenly suffocating. I had a stack of videotapes, found in a forgotten box, that appeared to show my family's entire day, 24 hours into the future. My family, going about their lives, oblivious. And I had a terrible, sinking feeling that morning was just the prelude. What would noon, afternoon, and, God forbid, night show me? The implications were staggering, nonsensical. It was impossible. Yet, the evidence was right there, whirring softly as the VCR heads disengaged. I grabbed the noon tape. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped it. I had to know. Or maybe I didn't. Maybe I should just throw these things in the industrial trash compactor behind the main office and pretend this never happened. But how could I? If this was real, if this was truly tomorrow unfolding on these magnetic ribbons, what did it mean? With a sense of mounting dread that was rapidly eclipsing my disbelief, I pushed the noon tape into the player. The machine clunked, accepted it. My reflection stared back from the darkened screen for a moment, pale, wide-eyed. Then the image resolved. It was our living room. The clock on the mantelpiece read 12:05. Emily was home from school. That was the first wrong thing. School didn't let out until 3:30. She was sitting on the sofa, curled up, looking pale. Sarah was with her, holding a thermometer. 101.5, Sarah said, her voice tight with concern. Okay, sweetie, back to bed with you. I'll call Dr. Evans. And I'll call the school. Let them know you won't be in this afternoon. Emily coughed, a dry, racking sound. My throat hurts, Mom. I know, baby. I'll get you some lozenges. I watched, my stomach churning. Emily wasn't sick today. She'd been perfectly fine this morning, bouncing around, arguing with Ben over the last pancake. What was happening? Could watching this change it? Or was I just a spectator to a future already set in stone? The scene played on. Sarah made phone calls. She sounded worried. Ben wasn't in this scene. Presumably, he was still at school. Where was I? The Sarah on the tape mentioned to Dr. Evans' nurse that Tom is tied up at work, a really difficult client. Another fiction. My Monday was supposed to be relatively light. The camera angle was different this time, from the bookshelf opposite the sofa. Static, unmoving, observing. I couldn't shake the feeling of being a voyeur to my own family's unfolding distress, a distress that hadn't even begun yet in my reality. The professional, analytical part of my brain, the part that designed software architecture and troubleshot complex systems, was struggling to find a logical framework for this. There wasn't one. This defied all known laws of physics, of causality. The tape continued. Sarah brought Emily a tray with tea and toast. They talked quietly. Emily seemed listless, which was so unlike her. The ordinariness of the scene, juxtaposed with its impossible nature, was making me feel unmoored, like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. What if this was some kind of elaborate, cruel hoax? But who would do this? And how? The precision was baffling. The interior of our house was perfect, down to the slightly crooked picture frame in the hallway that I kept meaning to straighten. The specific brand of tea Sarah was making for Emily. These weren't generic details. I fast-forwarded a little, impatient, anxious. The scene shifted. It was later, perhaps 1 o'clock. Sarah was on the phone, her back to the camera, talking in hushed tones. I could only catch snippets. No, he's still not picking up his cell. I left messages. Yes, I'm worried too. Was she talking about me? Why wouldn't I be picking up my phone? In this future, I was supposedly at work, dealing with a client. But if I knew what I knew now, where would I be? Frantically trying to prevent whatever this was leading to? The tape ended abruptly, cutting to static. I ejected it, my mind racing. 2 tapes down, a significant portion of tomorrow already witnessed. A sick child, a worried wife, a mysteriously absent me. This wasn't just a curiosity anymore. This was a threat. A glimpse into a future that felt increasingly ominous. I looked at the remaining tapes in the container. Afternoon, evening, and the one that filled me with a particular sense of foreboding. Night. Did I dare watch them? What if ignorance was bliss? But if there was something truly terrible on those tapes, didn't I have a responsibility to know? To try and stop it, if such a thing was even possible? The logical part of me screamed that this was insane. VHS tapes couldn't predict the future. There had to be an explanation. A prank. A hallucination brought on by dust and stress. Maybe I was overtired. Maybe the sandwich I ate was off. But the father in me, the husband, felt a cold dread seeping into his bones. The images were too real, the emotions too palpable. Sarah's concern for Emily, Emily's listless posture. These weren't actors. This was my family. I had to keep watching. I had to see what this was building towards. The alternative, to walk away, to dismiss it, felt like an abdication, a betrayal of the people I loved most. Even if it was a trick, a cruel deception, I had to be sure. My fingers hovered over the afternoon tape. The storage unit suddenly felt colder. The drizzle outside had picked up, drumming a relentless rhythm on the metal roof, like a countdown. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves, trying to approach this like one of my system diagnostic problems. Observe, analyze, identify the anomaly. But this wasn't code. This was my life. I pushed the tape in. The screen flickered. It was later. The light outside the living room window was dimmer, the gray of late afternoon. Ben was home from school now. He was sitting at the coffee table, ostensibly doing homework, but he kept glancing towards the hallway, presumably where Emily's bedroom was. He looked subdued, anxious. Sarah was on the phone again, her voice strained. No, still no answer from Tom. His office said he never made it in for his 10 o'clock. They thought he was working from home. I don't understand. This isn't like him. My blood ran cold. So, in this future, I don't even make it to my dentist appointment. I just vanish from the day's expected schedule after supposedly leaving for an early meeting I never had. Where was future me? And why was he incommunicado? The camera angle was the same, from the bookshelf, unblinking. Mom, is Emily going to be okay? Ben asked, his small voice tight with worry. Sarah ended her call quickly. She'll be fine, sweetie. Just a bit of a bug. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. She looked exhausted, her earlier concern now hardening into a kind of brittle tension. She kept glancing at her phone, then at the front door, as if expecting me to walk in at any moment. I watched them, my family, trapped in this little electronic window, moving towards something I couldn't yet see but could feel approaching, like a storm gathering just over the horizon. The feeling of helplessness was immense. I was a ghost in my own future, witnessing their anxiety, unable to reassure them, unable to explain my absence because, in their timeline, I was simply gone. The tape played on, mundane actions overlaid with a growing sense of unease. Ben tried to show Sarah a drawing. She praised it absently, her mind clearly elsewhere. The news played softly on the television, now talking about escalating traffic problems due to the earlier accident and a sudden, unseasonal downpour that was causing localized flooding. Details. All building a picture of a specific, verifiable day. Tomorrow. A thought struck me. The handwriting on the tapes. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Sarah's. Whose was it? And why film these specific, fairly unremarkable, slices of life? Unless the point wasn't the mundanity itself, but what it was leading to. A baseline, perhaps, before something deviated horribly. The afternoon tape was longer than the others. It showed Sarah trying to get Emily to eat some soup. Emily, looking weaker now, barely touched it. Sarah's calls to my phone became more frequent, more desperate. Tom, please, pick up. I'm starting to get really scared. Where are you? Her voice cracked on the last word. Listening to my wife's fear, a fear I was apparently causing by my absence, was like a knife twisting in my gut. I wanted to scream at the tiny figures on the screen, to tell them I was here, I was watching. I didn't understand either, but I would fix it. But I was just an observer, separated by a day in the strange medium of these tapes. Then, something new. The doorbell rang. Sarah visibly tensed. Ben looked up, hopeful. Is that Dad? Sarah went to the door, out of the camera's view. I could hear her voice, cautious. Yes? Who is it? A man's voice replied, muffled, indistinct. I couldn't make out the words. Then Sarah again. Oh, I see. Just a moment. She came back into the frame, her face pale. She was holding a small, official-looking card. Ben, sweetie, she said, her voice trembling slightly. That was a policeman. He's just asking some routine questions. Someone reported a car like Dad's involved in a minor incident. They're just checking. A policeman? My car? What incident? The produce truck pileup from the morning news tape. Was I involved in that? But that wouldn't explain my complete disappearance, my failure to call. Unless I was injured, incapacitated. The camera, fixed on the living room, didn't show the policeman. It didn't show Sarah's conversation at the door. It just recorded the aftermath. Sarah, trying to reassure a now visibly frightened Ben, her own fear a palpable presence in the room. It's nothing, Benny, she said, hugging him tightly. Dad's fine. He's just held up. He'll call soon. But her eyes darted towards the phone, willing it to ring. The tape continued for another 20 minutes, showing this strained atmosphere, the unanswered phone, the growing dread. Then, it too cut to static. I sat there in the dim, dusty storage unit, the hum of the small television the only sound besides my own ragged breathing. The air felt thick, heavy. Each tape was a chapter in a story I didn't want to read, but couldn't stop. The narrative was clear. A normal morning, a child falling ill, a husband vanishing, the authorities making inquiries. This wasn't just a series of random events. This was an escalation. 2 tapes remained, evening and night. My rational mind was still fighting, feebly now, against the evidence. It kept whispering about coincidences, about elaborate fabrications, but the sheer mundane accuracy was too compelling. The brand of tissues Sarah pulled from the box, the specific scuff mark on the coffee table leg from where Ben had crashed his remote-controlled car last month, the way Emily always tucked her left foot under her when she was feeling unwell. These weren't things a prankster could replicate so perfectly without intimate, constant access to our lives. And the camera angles, they were always static, from high places, the top of the fridge, a bookshelf, as if someone had placed a camera and just let it run. But we only owned one camcorder, an old Sony Height, currently sitting in another box marked Electronics Graveyard. These tapes were VHS, and the quality was too good, too clean for our old machine, even if it had been working. I felt a new kind of fear now, colder and sharper. It wasn't just about witnessing a potential future tragedy, it was about the tapes themselves. Where had they come from? Who had filmed this? And why were they here, in my storage unit, waiting for me to find them on this specific day? The question of prevention was paramount. If I was seeing tomorrow, did I have the power to change it, or was I simply being shown an immutable destiny, the classic paradox? If I acted on this knowledge, would I prevent the future on the tapes, or would my actions be the very thing that caused it to happen? My head throbbed. I needed to think, to plan. But first, I had to see the rest. I had to know the full extent of what I was up against. The evening tape beckoned. With a grim sense of obligation, I slotted it into the VCR. I was no longer just a passive observer. I was an investigator, piecing together clues from a future that hadn't happened yet, in a desperate race against a clock only I could see. The image that appeared was darker. Evening had fallen outside the living room windows. Lamps were on, casting long shadows. Ben was asleep on the sofa, curled under a blanket, his face tear-streaked. Emily was presumably still in her room. Sarah was pacing, phone pressed to her ear. She looked utterly distraught. "I've called every hospital in a 50-mile radius," she was saying, presumably to a friend, or perhaps my sister. Her voice was raw with unshed tears. "Nothing. The police said they'd check the accident reports again, but the car wasn't registered at any of the scenes they attended today. It's like he vanished into thin air." She paused, listening. "No, his office hasn't heard a thing. He missed all his afternoon appointments. This isn't just not like him, Linda. This is terrifying." Linda, my sister. So she was talking to Linda. I felt a pang of guilt, knowing my sister would be worried sick in this future scenario. Sarah hung up the phone with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. She walked over to Ben, gently brushed his hair back from his forehead. Her face was a mask of anguish. She looked so alone. The camera angle, still from the bookshelf, felt malevolent now, a cold, impartial eye recording their suffering. Suddenly, a new sound, a faint scratching. It seemed to come from outside, perhaps the front door or a window. Sarah froze. Her head snapped up. "Hello?" She called out, her voice barely a whisper. "Is someone there?" Silence. Then the scratching again, louder this time, more insistent, like fingernails on wood. Ben stirred in his sleep, whimpering. Sarah quickly moved to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. I leaned forward, my heart pounding, trying to see what she saw, but the angle was wrong. I could only see her reaction. Her eyes widened. She stepped back from the window, a hand flying to her mouth. Her face was a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "No," she whispered. "It can't be." What couldn't be? What did she see? The scratching stopped. An oppressive silence descended on the living room, broken only by Ben's soft, sleeping breaths and the frantic thumping of my own heart. Sarah backed away further from the window, her gaze fixed on the front door. She looked terrified. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking so badly she almost dropped it. She was dialing, presumably 911. "What is it, Mom?" Ben mumbled, waking up, disoriented and scared by the fear radiating from his mother. "Stay there, sweetie. Sarah said, her voice strained, trying to sound calm but failing. It's probably nothing. But her eyes told a different story. They were wide with a primal fear I had never seen in her before. Then, the sound came again, not scratching this time. A soft, almost melodic humming. It seemed to be coming from all around, from outside the house. A strange, discordant tune that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. On the screen, Sarah had the phone to her ear. I could hear a faint, tinny voice. The dispatcher. 911. What is your emergency? There's someone outside my house, Sarah said, her voice trembling. I don't know who it is. They were scratching at the door, at the windows. The humming grew louder, closer. It had an unsettling, almost inhuman quality. Can you describe them, ma'am? The dispatcher asked. Sarah hesitated. I only caught a glimpse. It was dark, but it looked like Tom, my husband, but it couldn't be. He's missing. And he looked wrong. My blood turned to ice. It looked like me, but wrong? What did that mean? The implications were horrifying. Was this why I was missing? Had something happened to me? Was something impersonating me? The humming intensified, and then a sharp, violent crack from the direction of the front door, like wood splintering. Sarah screamed, a short, choked sound. Ben started to cry, properly cry, terrified. Ma'am, what's happening? The dispatcher's voice, urgent now. Another crack, louder this time. The picture on the portable television flickered violently. The lights in the living room on the tape dimmed, then surged, then dimmed again, as if the power was failing. He's trying to get in. Sarah shrieked into the phone. He's breaking down the door. Please, send someone. My children are here. The humming was deafening now, a mind-numbing thrum that seemed to vibrate through the small speaker of my television, through the concrete floor of the storage unit, into my very bones. And mixed with it, I could hear something else. A voice. My voice, but distorted, layered, as if spoken by a chorus, all slightly out of sync. It was saying something, over and over, but the words were indistinct, lost in the cacophony. The image on the screen broke up into a mess of static and distorted colors. I could hear Sarah screaming Ben's name, Ben's terrified sobs, the splintering of wood, that awful, pervasive humming, and my own twisted voice. Then silence. The tape ended. Just pure, hissing, static. I stared at the screen, my chest heaving, a cold sweat drenching my body. My hands were clamped onto the little television, knuckles white. What had I just witnessed? An assault on my home? By something that looked like me but wasn't? Something that had made Sarah, my strong, capable Sarah, scream in pure terror? I felt sick. Utterly, profoundly sick. This was no prank. This was a prelude to unimaginable horror. One tape left. Night. I didn't want to watch it. Part of me, the part that still clung to sanity, was screaming to stop, to destroy these harbingers of doom and hope for the best. But another, deeper part knew I couldn't. I had to see the end. I had to know what happened to my family, to Sarah, to Emily, to Ben. With trembling fingers, I ejected the evening tape. Its story of escalating terror felt burned into my retinas. The humming, my distorted voice, it echoed in my mind. The final tape felt heavy in my hand, heavier than its physical weight. October 15, night. The block capitals seemed to mock me. I took a ragged breath. The air in the storage unit was stale, oppressive. The only light came from the small, bare bulb near the office and the weak glow of my portable television screen, now displaying only static. I had to. I pushed the last tape into the VCR. The clunk of the mechanism engaging sounded like a coffin lid closing. The screen flickered. For a horrifying moment, it was just blackness. No image, no sound. My heart leaped into my throat. Was this it? Just nothing? Then, a low, grainy image slowly resolved. The viewpoint was different again. It was from outside, looking through the shattered remnants of what had once been our kitchen window. The glass was mostly gone, jagged shards clinging to the frame. The angle was low, as if the camera had been placed on the ground, amidst the debris. Inside, The kitchen was a wreck. Chairs were overturned. The table was askew. Cupboard doors hung open, their contents spilled onto the floor. It looked like a storm had passed through it. There was no movement, no sound, apart from a faint, persistent dripping, like a faucet left running, or something else. My breath caught in my throat. I scanned the wreckage, desperate and terrified, looking for any sign of my family. Then I saw it, a small splash of color amidst the debris near the overturned kitchen table. Ben's favorite blue sweatshirt. It was just lying there, partially covered by a fallen cereal box. Empty. A whimper escaped me. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." The camera remained fixed, static, unmoving, a silent, damning witness. The silence was the worst part. After the chaos and terror of the evening tape, this dead, still aftermath was somehow more horrifying. Where were they? What had happened after the door broke down, after Sarah's scream? The tape played on, showing nothing but the devastated kitchen. Each second of silence, of stillness, was an agony. I wanted to scream, to fast forward, to make something, anything, happen, but I was powerless. Minutes crawled by, 5, 10, just the silent, ruined kitchen. The only light seemed to be the ambient glow from streetlights outside, filtering through the broken window, casting long, eerie shadows. Then, a flicker of movement in the deepest shadow, near the hallway that led to the bedrooms. I leaned closer, straining my eyes. It was hard to make out, just a shifting of the darkness. A shape slowly emerged from the hallway, tall, gaunt. It moved with a strange, unnatural fluidity, like a marionette with tangled strings. It was too dark to see features clearly, but the silhouette, it was horribly, sickeningly familiar. It was my height, my build. It paused in the doorway to the kitchen, a dark sentinel overlooking the destruction. It stood there for a long moment, perfectly still. Then, it slowly raised a hand. In that hand, it was holding something small and metallic. My keys, my house keys. The figure, the thing that looked like me, slowly turned its head, as if surveying the room. Even in the grainy dimness, I could feel an intelligence there, a cold, alien awareness. It wasn't me. I knew that with a certainty that chilled me to the marrow. This was the wrong Tom that Sarah had seen. It took a step into the kitchen, its movements jerky, yet somehow deliberate. It stopped by the overturned table, near where Ben's sweatshirt lay. It looked down at the sweatshirt for a long, unreadable moment. Then, it did something that made my stomach heave. It knelt. It picked up the sweatshirt. It brought the fabric to its face, and for a horrifying instant, I thought it was going to smell it, inhale it. Instead, it just held it. Then, very slowly, very deliberately, it began to tear the sweatshirt, rip by rip. The sound of fabric rending, quiet but distinct in the otherwise silent room, was obscene. I couldn't breathe. I was watching this creature, this imposter wearing my form, desecrating my son's clothing in my wrecked home. Where was my family? What had this thing done to them? The creature finished tearing the sweatshirt into strips. It dropped them onto the floor, a meaningless pile of blue fabric. Then it stood up. It turned, and for the first time, its face was angled slightly more towards the low-slung camera. There were no discernible features. It was as if my face had been roughly sculpted from shadows, or like a photograph badly out of focus. But the shape was mine, and from that shadowy visage, a sound emerged. A low chuckle. It was my voice, but hollow, empty, devoid of any human warmth. It was the sound of a predator pleased with its hunt. The thing turned and walked back towards the hallway, disappearing into the darkness from which it had emerged. The tape continued to run. The kitchen remained silent, destroyed. The torn pieces of Ben's sweatshirt lay on the floor like a final, brutal statement. I didn't realize I was crying until I felt the hot tears on my cheeks. My entire body was shaking with a mixture of terror, grief, and a rage so profound it felt like it would tear me apart. The tape kept rolling. More silence, more devastation. It seemed to be an endurance test. How long could I watch the scene of my family's apparent destruction? Then, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only another 15 or 20 minutes, the tape abruptly cut to static. The show was over. The future, or at least one horrifying version of it, had been laid bare. I slumped back against a stack of boxes, the portable television slipping from my numb fingers to land with a soft thud on a pile of old blankets. The storage unit seemed to spin around me. The smell of dust and decay was overwhelming. It was real. I couldn't deny it anymore. Not after that. The progression was too logical, too horrifyingly consistent. From a normal morning to a sick child and a missing father, to an attack, to this silent, brutal aftermath. My family, Sarah, Emily, Ben, the tapes didn't explicitly show what happened to them, but the implications were clear. The creature that looked like me, it had been in the house with them. The house was wrecked. They were gone. A sob tore its way out of my chest. I had to stop this. I had less than 24 hours. Tomorrow morning, October 15th, the first tape, Morning, was due to begin. The events it depicted would start to unfold. But how? How did you fight a future you'd already seen? How did you stop a creature that wore your face and possessed some unknown, terrifying power? My mind raced, desperately trying to find a foothold, a plan. The tapes, they were the key. They were a warning. They showed me the sequence of events. If I could change one thing, just one link in that chain, could I alter the outcome? The early meeting I supposedly had, I wouldn't go. I would stay home. That was the first deviation. Emily getting sick. Could I prevent that? Was it a random illness, or was it somehow connected to the larger, unfolding horror? The tapes gave no clue as to the cause of her sickness. My disappearance. The tapes showed Sarah unable to reach me. I had to make sure I was reachable, that I was there. The policeman. His arrival was a consequence of my car being reported. If I didn't use my car, or if I wasn't involved in any incident. And then, the creature, the thing that looked like me, scratching at the doors and windows, the humming, my distorted voice, breaking in. This was the core of it, this entity. Where did it come from? Why was it targeting my family? Why did it look like me? The tapes offered no answers, only the terrifying result of its appearance. I looked at the stack of VHS tapes, now piled beside the VCR. They were no longer just recordings. They were a roadmap to hell, and I was the only one who had seen it. The first, most crucial step was to get out of this storage unit, to go home, to be with Sarah and the kids. The urge to see them, to hold them, to reassure myself they were safe now, was overwhelming. I scrambled to my feet, my legs unsteady. I gathered the tapes, stuffing them back into the plastic container. I unplugged the portable television, coiling its cord with shaking hands. I had to appear normal. I couldn't tell Sarah about this. Not yet. She'd think I was insane, and maybe I was. But if there was even a 1% chance that these tapes were true, I had to act as if they were gospel. The thought of the handwriting on the labels flashed through my mind again. Who wrote that? Who made these tapes? Was it the creature? Was it some other, unknown entity trying to warn me? Or to torment me? There was no time for those questions now. All that mattered was the ticking clock. It was mid-afternoon on Sunday, October 14th. The first tape began tomorrow morning. I had maybe 16, 17 hours before the timeline on those tapes started to converge with my reality. I slammed the storage unit door down, the clang echoing in the damp air. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers clumsy. Finally, it clicked shut. I practically ran to my car, the container of tapes clutched to my chest like a fragile, terrible treasure. Driving home, my mind was a maelstrom of fear and frantic planning. Every normal car, every pedestrian, seemed to hide a potential threat. The world outside my windshield looked vibrant, oblivious, bathed in the weak Sunday afternoon sun that had finally broken through the drizzle. They didn't know. They couldn't know. When I pulled into our driveway, the sight of our familiar, unassuming house filled me with a fresh wave of terror. This was the place. This was the scene of the future crime. Every window, every door, seemed vulnerable. I burst through the front door. "Sarah, kids, I'm home." My voice was too loud, too strained. Sarah came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, a surprised look on her face. "Tom, you're back early. Did you finish the whole unit?" "Enough for today. I managed, trying to sound casual. Where are the kids? Ben's in his room playing video games. Emily's doing homework at the dining table. Why? Is everything okay? You look pale. I forced a smile. Just tired. Dusty work. I needed to see them. I walked quickly to the dining room. Emily was there, head bent over her textbook, a pencil tucked behind her ear. She looked up and smiled. Hi, Dad. Hey, sweetie. She looked perfectly healthy. No sign of the illness from the noon tape. Not yet. Then to Ben's room. He was indeed engrossed in a game, thumbs flying over the controller. He gave me a cursory, "Hi, Dad," without looking away from the screen. Normal, healthy, safe. For now. I went back to Sarah in the kitchen. I hugged her, probably too tightly, for too long. She hugged me back, a little puzzled. Wow, what was that for? Did you find some sentimental treasure in the dust? Just missed you, I said, my voice thick. I buried my face in her hair, inhaling her familiar scent. She was real, solid, here. But the images from the tapes were seared into my brain. Sarah, pale and worried, calling my phone. Emily, sick and listless. Ben, scared and confused. The wrecked kitchen. The creature wearing my face. I had to protect them. I had to change what I'd seen. The first point of divergence was my early meeting tomorrow morning. That was easy enough to prevent. I simply wouldn't go to any meeting. I'd stay home. I'd be here. But what about Emily's illness? And my car? The tape showed the police mentioning my car. Should I hide it? Not use it? And the entity. How did you prepare for something like that? Something that looked like you, hummed an unearthly tune, and could apparently tear down doors? I spent the rest of that Sunday in a state of hypervigilance, every nerve ending screaming. I tried to act normal, for Sarah's sake, for the kids. We had dinner. We watched a movie. But my mind was elsewhere, replaying the horrifying scenes from the tapes, trying to analyze, to find a weakness, a way out. The most immediate problem was the tapes themselves. I couldn't leave them in the house. What if Sarah found them? How could I explain them? And I needed to watch them again, carefully, methodically, to scour them for any detail I might have missed, any clue. Late that night, after Sarah and the kids were asleep, I retrieved the container from my car. I took it down to my small workshop in the basement. It was the most secure, private place in the house. I had an old television and VCR down there, relics from a previous entertainment system upgrade. I locked the workshop door. The air was cool, smelling faintly of sawdust and oil. I set up the VCR and television. My hands were steadier now, fueled by a desperate resolve. I had to be methodical. I had to treat this as an intelligence briefing from an unreliable, terrifying source. I started with the morning tape again. Our kitchen, Sarah, Ben, Emily, the dialogue about my non-existent early meeting, the news report about the produce truck. I watched it 3 times, notepad in hand, jotting down every detail. The time on the microwave when Emily asked about coffee, 7:18 a.m. The brand of cereal Ben was eating, Rainbow Loops, still out of stock in our current reality. Sarah's blue silk robe. These details were my only weapons. They were the fixed points in a future I had to derail. Then the noon tape, Emily sick, the call to Dr. Evans, Sarah's worry about me being incommunicado. Her exact words, "Tom is tied up at work, a really difficult client. 101.5 temperature for Emily." I wrote it all down. The afternoon tape, Ben home from school, anxious. Sarah's calls to my office. He never made it in for his 10 o'clock. The policeman at the door. Someone reported a car like Dad's involved in a minor incident. The unseasonal downpour and localized flooding mentioned on the news. And then the evening tape, the scratching, the humming. Sarah's terrified call to 911. Her words, "It looked like Tom, my husband, but it couldn't be. He looked wrong." The splintering wood, the power flickering. Her scream, my distorted voice. Each viewing was agony, but I forced myself to be clinical. What could I learn? The creature, the wrong Tom, was clearly the aggressor. It seemed to want to get into the house. Was its appearance as me a disguise, a mockery? The humming. It was distinctive, almost like a distorted musical scale, but with notes that felt wrong, somehow off-key, in a way that set my teeth on edge. Finally, the night tape, the desolation, the silence, the creature in my form, tearing Ben's sweatshirt, its hollow chuckle, the keys, my keys. How did it get my keys? Did it take them from me, or from inside the house after it broke in? I paused the night tape on the image of the creature holding my keys. If it had my keys, it implied a confrontation with me prior to its appearance at the house, or that it had found them after subduing me. The tape showed Sarah saying I never made it to my 10 o'clock appointment, that my office hadn't seen me. So, whatever happened to me, in that timeline, happened sometime between me supposedly leaving for an early meeting and 10 a.m. This was crucial. If I could avoid whatever incapacitated me in that window of time, I could stay in the house, protect my family, and face this thing. But what was it? The tapes gave no origin, no explanation, just its terrifying presence. I looked at the clock on my workshop wall. 2:37 a.m. Monday, October 15th, had begun, the day of the tapes. In just a few hours, at 7:18 a.m., according to my notes, Emily would ask about coffee, and Sarah would say I was at an early meeting. The first event. I had to change it. I would be there. I would make the coffee. I would not leave the house. A desperate plan began to form. Stay home, keep the family together, secure the house as much as possible, and somehow prepare for an assault by an entity that looked like me and possessed unknown abilities. I thought about weapons. I had a baseball bat in the garage, some heavy tools in the workshop. Pathetic, against whatever that thing was, but better than nothing. The most important thing was information. The tapes were my only source. Was there anything else? The handwriting on the labels, blocky capitals, unfamiliar. Why were they in our storage unit? Who put them there? Had that person encountered this creature before? I looked at the plastic container the tapes had come in. Standard, anonymous, no clues there. Exhaustion was starting to set in, but fear and adrenaline kept me going. I made a checklist. 1. Be present at breakfast. No early meeting. 2. Monitor Emily closely. If she showed any signs of illness, act immediately. But what if her illness was a precursor, a symptom of the entity's influence starting? 3. Keep my car in the garage. Do not drive it. This should prevent the minor incident and the policeman's visit. 4. Secure the house. Reinforce doors and windows if possible, without alarming Sarah too much. 5. Stay in constant communication if, for any reason, I had to be separated from Sarah. 6. Prepare for the entity's arrival in the evening. The scratching, the humming. How did one prepare for a humming that seemed to vibrate your soul? I thought about calling the police myself. Hello, officer? I found some VHS tapes that show a creature impersonating me attacking my family tonight. They'd lock me up. No. I was on my own. Sleep was impossible. I spent the remaining hours before dawn going over my notes, replaying short segments of the tapes, trying to burn every detail into my memory. The layout of the wrecked kitchen, the sound of the humming, the way the creature moved. As the first gray light of dawn began to creep through the small basement window, I felt a grim determination solidifying amidst the fear. I had seen the future. Now, I had to unmake it. I went upstairs quietly. Sarah was still asleep. I looked at her peaceful face, and the images from the tapes, her terror, her anguish, flooded my mind. I would not let that happen. I went to the kitchen. The clock on the microwave read 6:05 a.m. I started making coffee. The aroma filled the quiet house, a small, normal comfort in the face of the encroaching nightmare. Soon I heard stirring from upstairs. Ben, then Emily, then Sarah. The day was beginning. The day of the tapes. My heart pounded in my chest. Showtime. Ben was first into the kitchen, just like on the tape. Sleepy, tousled hair. "Morning, Dad," he mumbled, then did a double take. "You're making coffee? Mom said you had an early meeting." My blood ran cold. Sarah hadn't even come downstairs yet. How did Ben know about the meeting? "What meeting, Bud?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Mom told me last night. that you had to leave super early today. I stared at him. Sarah hadn't mentioned any such thing to me. Was this it? Was the timeline already asserting itself subtly, trying to nudge events back onto their predicted course? Sarah came in then, tying her blue silk robe, the same robe from the tape. "Morning, Tom. Oh, you're making coffee? I thought you'd be gone by now." "Gone where?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. She looked surprised. "Your early meeting? You told me about it yesterday, remember? With the Henderson account? You said you needed to be in the office by 7. I stared at her. I had absolutely no recollection of this conversation. The Henderson account was one of mine, yes, but I had no meeting scheduled with them, early or otherwise. Was my memory failing? Or was something more insidious happening? Were these details being fed to them? "I must have gotten my days mixed up," I said, forcing a smile. "That meeting's tomorrow. Plenty of time for coffee this morning." Sarah frowned, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. "Are you sure, Tom? You seemed pretty definite about it." "Positive," I said, trying to sound breezy. "My mistake." The clock on the microwave showed 7:17 a.m. Emily walked in, headphones around her neck. "Is Dad making coffee?" she asked, exactly as on the tape. My carefully constructed plan, my first deviation, already felt like it was crumbling. The future was fighting back. "Yep," I said, pouring a cup. "And I'm not running late for any meeting." I looked directly at Sarah, then Emily. "I'm here." Breakfast was a tense affair, for me at least. I watched them all like a hawk. Sarah kept giving me strange looks, clearly still puzzled by my forgotten meeting. Ben was oblivious, happily munching his oat flakes, not rainbow loops, thank God. That was one detail that hadn't manifested. Yet, Emily seemed fine, chatty, energetic. No sign of the impending illness from the noon tape. I clung to that small victory. The news was on the kitchen television, muted. I kept glancing at it, waiting for the report about the produce truck on the Crosstown Expressway. If that didn't happen, it would be another significant deviation. Around 7:45 a.m., as Sarah was getting ready for work and the kids were gathering their school bags, the local news anchor broke in with a traffic update. "We're getting reports of a major backup on the Crosstown Expressway due to an overturned produce truck near exit 12. Expect significant delays." My stomach dropped. It was happening. Despite my presence, despite me not leaving for any meeting, this key detail from the tape had just materialized. The sense of an inexorable, predetermined sequence of events closing in on me was terrifying. Sarah sighed. "Oh great, the Crosstown. That's my route. I'll be late." Maybe work from home today?" I suggested, a little too quickly. She looked at me, surprised. "Why? I have a big presentation. I need to be there." She paused. "Are you feeling okay, Tom? You've been acting really strange this morning." "Just worried about the traffic for you," I lied, lamely. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. She wouldn't believe me. I had to find a way to navigate this, to protect them without revealing the impossible truth of the tapes, because that truth, I suspected, could be as damaging as the events themselves if it caused panic or disbelief at the wrong moment. She left for work, casting a concerned glance back at me. The kids left for the school bus a few minutes later, Emily chattering about her history test, Ben about his friend's party. Just like on the tape. Except Emily wasn't sick, and I was still here. Small deviations. Were they enough? I spent the morning in a state of agitated vigilance. I checked all the doors and windows, making sure they were locked. I brought the baseball bat up from the garage and stashed it in the umbrella stand near the front door. I resisted the urge to call Sarah every 5 minutes. Around 11 a.m., my phone rang. It was the school. My heart leaped into my throat. "Mr. Davison, this is Nurse Jenkins from Northwood Elementary." "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. This was it. The noon tape. Emily. Emily came to my office a little while ago complaining of a sore throat and a headache. I took her temperature, and it's 101.5. I think it would be best if someone came to pick her up. The exact temperature from the tape. A wave of dizziness hit me. How How was this happening with such precision? I had changed things. I was home, but Emily was still getting sick, right on schedule. "I'll be right there," I said, my voice hoarse. I hung up, my mind reeling. The future wasn't just fighting back. It was actively reasserting itself, bending events to fit its preordained pattern. My presence at home had changed nothing for Emily's illness. I had to get her, but the car. The tapes showed the police mentioning my car in connection with an incident. If I drove, would I be forced into that part of the script? I couldn't risk it. The school was only a mile away. I could walk or jog. It would take longer, but it felt safer, less like playing into the tape's narrative. I called Sarah. "It's Emily," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "School nurse called. She has a fever, 101.5. I'm going to pick her up." "Oh no, poor thing," Sarah said, her concern immediate. "Is that what you were worried about this morning? Did she seem off to you?" "A little," I lied. "I'm walking over to get her. I don't want to take the car out if that traffic on the crosstown is still bad." A plausible excuse. "Okay, keep me posted. I'll try to leave work a bit early if I can." Her voice was tight with the worry I remembered from the tape. I practically ran to the school. Emily was pale and listless in the nurse's office, just as she'd appeared on the noon tape. "My throat hurts, Dad," she mumbled, leaning against me as we walked home slowly. Once back, I settled her in her bed, gave her some medicine. She coughed, that same dry, racking cough from the video. It was all unfolding, piece by horrifying piece. I sat with her for a while, stroking her forehead. She felt warm, too warm. The fear I felt was a cold, constricting band around my chest. My earlier changes, staying home, not having the early meeting, seemed to have been minor ripples, easily smoothed over by the relentless current of whatever force was driving these events. The clock on her bedside table read 12:05 p.m., exactly the time on the mantelpiece in the noon tape when Sarah was taking her temperature. My phone rang. It was Sarah. "How is she?" "Sleeping now," I said. "Fever's still up." I gave her some Tylenol. "I'm trying to get away from work, but this presentation is dragging on. Are you okay there? You sound stressed." "I'm fine," I lied. "Just worried about Em." The script demanded I be incommunicado, or at least that Sarah thought I was. But I was here. I was answering my phone. This was a change, a significant one. But then she said, "I tried calling your cell a few minutes ago, and it went straight to voicemail. Did you have it off?" My blood ran cold. "No, it's been on. Right here beside me." I looked at my phone. Full bars, powered on. "Weird," she said. "Must be a network issue. Anyway, I'll call you back when I'm leaving." A network issue? Or was the timeline somehow interfering with communication, trying to isolate me, to make me fit the missing Tom narrative from the tapes? The thought sent a fresh wave of paranoia through me. The afternoon crawled by. I checked on Emily regularly. She slept fitfully. Ben came home from school, subdued when he heard his sister was sick. He sat at the coffee table to do his homework, just like on the afternoon tape. He kept glancing towards Emily's room. The unseasonal downpour started around 3 p.m., just as the news report on the tape had predicted. Heavy rain lashed against the windows. The sky turned a bruised, ugly gray. I kept my phone clutched in my hand. I made a point of calling Sarah around 3:30. "Hi, just checking in," I said. "Oh, Tom, hi." She sounded relieved. "I was just about to try you again. My presentation finally finished. I'm packing up now. How's Emily?" "Still sleeping mostly. Fever hasn't broken yet." "And you? You okay?" My earlier call really did go straight to voicemail. I was starting to get a bit worried. "Phone's been working fine for me," I said, forcing a casual tone. Maybe it was the storm interfering with the signal, but I knew with a sickening certainty that it wasn't the storm. Something was trying to cut me off. The key event of the afternoon tape was the policeman arriving, asking about my car. If I hadn't used the car, that shouldn't happen. I clung to that hope. No policeman, no escalation of Sarah's fear about my whereabouts. Sarah got home around 4:30, looking tired and worried. She went straight in to check on Emily. I watched Ben, who was trying to show Sarah a drawing, and saw her praise it absently, her mind clearly on Emily, and, I suspected, on my strange behavior. The scene was playing out, but with subtle differences. I was here. Sarah wasn't frantic about my absence. But the core elements, Emily sick, the oppressive weather, Ben's anxiety, were all in place. As evening approached, my tension ratcheted up to an almost unbearable level. The evening tape was next. The scratching, the humming, the thing that looked like me. I moved the baseball bat from the umbrella stand to just inside the living room, propped against the sofa, within easy reach. I made sure my heavy Maglite flashlight was also nearby. Small comforts, but I needed something. We had a quiet, subdued dinner. Emily stayed in bed, managing only a few sips of soup. Ben picked at his food. Sarah and I exchanged worried glances. The atmosphere in the house was thick with unspoken anxiety. My anxiety, I knew, was far more specific and far more terrifying. After dinner, Ben curled up on the sofa to watch cartoons, trying to distract himself. Sarah was on the phone with her sister, Linda, updating her on Emily. Her voice was strained, but not panicked, not like on the tape when she thought I was missing. Another small victory. But as the sky outside turned from bruised gray to inky black, I felt the hairs on the back of my neck begin to prickle. The time was approaching. The time from the tape when the scratching started. I kept glancing at the windows, at the front door. Every creak of the old house settling made me jump. Ben fell asleep on the sofa around 8 p.m., just as he had on the tape. Sarah covered him with a blanket. She looked exhausted. "I'm going to check on Emily again, then maybe try to get some rest myself," she said. "This day has been a lot." "You do that," I said. "I'll stay up for a bit. Read." She nodded, gave me a tired smile, and headed upstairs. I was alone in the living room, with a sleeping Ben, the rhythmic drumming of rain on the roof, and the suffocating weight of anticipation. I looked at the clock. 8:15 p.m. On the tape, the scratching had started shortly after Sarah's call with Linda, around this time. Silence. Only the rain. My heart hammered against my ribs. I strained my ears, listening for any sound out of the ordinary. Nothing. Had I done it? Had my presence, my small alterations to the script, been enough to derail the horror? Had I broken the chain of events? A tiny seed of hope began to sprout. Maybe the car was the key. No minor incident, no police visit, no escalating fear for Sarah about me being missing. Perhaps that had somehow diffused the situation, prevented the entity's trigger or appearance. The clock ticked. 8:20 p.m. 8:25 p.m. Still nothing but the rain and the quiet hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Ben breathed softly on the sofa. I allowed myself a small, shaky exhale. Maybe, just maybe. Then I heard it. Faint, indistinct at first. I almost dismissed it as a branch scraping against the house in the wind. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was coming from the front door. My blood turned to ice. The hope that had flickered moments before was extinguished, plunged into freezing darkness. It was happening. Despite everything, it was here. I froze, listening. The scratching came again, a little louder this time, insistent, exactly as I remembered from the tape. Fingernails on wood. Ben stirred, whimpering in his sleep. I put a hand on his shoulder, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. My mind raced. The tape. Sarah had gone to the window, seen the wrong Tom. Then the humming had started, then the attack on the door. I had to do something different. I couldn't let Sarah come down. I couldn't let her see it. I crept to the window beside the front door, the one Sarah had looked through on the tape. My heart was a wild drum against my ribs. I peered through a tiny gap in the curtains. It was dark, the porch light casting eerie shadows in the driving rain. For a moment, I saw nothing but the glistening wet steps and the rain hammering down. Then, a figure moved out of the deepest shadow at the edge of the porch. It was me. Or rather, the thing that looked like me, tall, gaunt, dressed in clothes identical to what I was wearing right now, jeans, a dark sweater. But its face, it was just as I'd seen on the night tape, indistinct, like smudged charcoal, yet unmistakably my shape. And its posture was wrong, subtly inhuman, the head tilted at a slightly unnatural angle. It took a step towards the door, and the scratching sound came again, but I could see now, it wasn't using its hands. The sound was coming from its fingernails, which were too long, unnaturally sharp, glinting wetly in the porch light as it dragged them lightly across the wood of the door. A wave of nausea washed over me. This was the creature, the wrong Tom. It stopped, head still tilted, as if listening. Then, it slowly turned its shadowy face towards the window where I was hidden. It couldn't see me. It couldn't. But it felt like it was looking right at me. And then, the humming began. Low at first, a faint vibration in the air, then growing louder, that same discordant, inhuman melody I remembered, with chilling clarity from the tape. It seemed to bypass my ears and thrum directly in my bones, making my teeth ache. This was it. The sequence was identical. My changes had meant nothing. No, they had to mean something. I was here. I was armed, however pathetically. Sarah was upstairs, hopefully, still unaware. I backed away from the window, my mind a whirl of terror and desperate calculation. I had to face this thing. I couldn't let it get to Sarah and the kids. The humming intensified, and then, mixed with it, came the voice. My voice, distorted, layered, horrible, saying something, over and over. This time, I could almost make out the words. Almost. Something like, "Let me in. I'm cold." It was a grotesque mockery. A sharp, violent crack from the front door. Wood splintering, just like on the tape. It was starting to break through. "Dad?" Ben's voice, small and terrified. He was awake, sitting up on the sofa, eyes wide with fear. "Stay there, Ben," I hissed, grabbing the baseball bat. My hands were slick with sweat. "Don't move." Another crack, much louder. A piece of the doorframe splintered inwards. The humming was deafening, filling the house, vibrating the floorboards. I heard footsteps on the stairs. "Sarah? Tom? What was that noise? What's going on?" Her voice, alarmed. "Stay upstairs, Sarah," I yelled, my voice cracking. "Lock your door. Call 911. This was different from the tape. On the tape, she'd come down. She'd made the call from the living room. A thunderous crash. The top panel of the front door buckled, wood exploding inwards. Through the jagged hole, I could see the shadowy face of the creature, its eyes like pits of darkness. The humming seemed to solidify, pressing in on me, making it hard to think. The distorted voice was clearer now. "Open the door, Tom." It knew my name. Of course it did. It looked like me. "Get away from my family," I screamed, adrenaline and terror making me reckless. I swung the baseball bat wildly at the hole in the door, connecting with something that felt not quite solid, like hitting wet sand. The creature recoiled slightly, and a sound came from it, not a scream of pain, but a low, guttural hiss, like air escaping a punctured lung. The humming faltered for a split second, then resumed, even louder, more furious. "Tom, I've called them," Sarah shouted from the top of the stairs. "They're on their way. What is that thing?" Her voice was shaking with terror. She must have seen it through the banisters. The creature slammed its shoulder against the damaged door. The hinges shrieked. The lock bolt tore from the splintering wood. The door flew open with a final, violent crack, banging against the hallway wall. And there it stood, in my hallway. The wrong Tom. It was taller than I remembered from the tapes, or maybe it was the way it held itself, unnaturally erect. The shadowy face seemed to resolve slightly in the hallway light, and I could see a horrifying approximation of my features twisted into a predatory sneer. Its eyes were entirely black, like polished stones. It took a step inside. Its movements were still jerky, unnatural, but there was a horrifying purpose to them. "Ben, get behind me," I yelled, positioning myself between the creature and my son, who was frozen with terror on the sofa. I held the baseball bat up, a pathetic defense against this nightmare. The creature stopped, 10 feet away. It tilted its head again, studying me. The humming continued, a physical pressure in the room. "You are not welcome here," it said, its voice a gravelly echo of my own. each word sounding like it was dredged from a deep well. "This is my home," I retorted, trying to keep my voice from shaking. "Get out." It chuckled, that same hollow, empty sound from the night tape. "Your home? Your family?" It gestured vaguely with one of its two long-fingered hands towards Ben, then towards the stairs where Sarah was. "They will be mine." A primal rage surged through me, momentarily eclipsing the fear. "You will not touch them." I lunged, swinging the bat with all my strength at its head. It moved with impossible speed, not dodging exactly, but shifting, like smoke. The bat connected, but it was like hitting a pillow, a sack of loose rags. There was no satisfying thud of impact, no cry of pain. The creature simply absorbed the blow, its shadowy face unchanged. Then its hand shot out, impossibly fast, and gripped the bat. Its fingers were like iron bands. I tried to pull the bat free, but its grip was unbreakable. "Foolish," it hissed, its black eyes fixed on mine. With a contemptuous flick of its wrist, it wrenched the bat from my grasp and sent it clattering across the room. I was disarmed. It took another step closer. The humming intensified, and I felt a wave of dizziness, my vision blurring at the edges. The air grew cold, unnaturally cold. "Tom," Sarah screamed from the stairs. I heard her start to come down. "No, Sarah, stay back," I yelled, desperate. The creature's attention flickered towards her, and for a second, its shadowy features seemed to sharpen with a predatory interest. That momentary distraction was all I needed. I did the only thing I could think of. I charged it, not with a weapon, but with my body, aiming for its center of mass, hoping to knock it off balance, to buy some time, any time. I slammed into it. It was like hitting a wall made of cold, damp clay. It gave, slightly, but didn't fall. Its hands came up, grabbing my shoulders, its grip icy and incredibly strong. Those two long fingers dug into my flesh like claws. I was face to face with it now, inches from that smudged, horrifying replica of my own countenance. The black eyes seemed to swallow the light. The humming was inside my head, rattling my skull. "You cannot stop what is to come," it rasped, its breath like a fetid wind from a tomb. And then I saw them, my keys, my house keys, dangling from a chain clipped to its belt, just as I'd seen on the night tape. How had it gotten them? The tape had been unclear. Had it taken them from future me? No, it hadn't gotten them yet. These were my keys, the ones from my pocket. But how? I checked my pocket instinctively. Empty. It chuckled again, that awful hollow sound. "Clever, boy. Looking for these?" It jangled the keys mockingly. It had taken them from me, sometime, somehow, without me even realizing. The implications were terrifying. It wasn't just strong, it was subtle, capable of things I couldn't comprehend. Panic surged. If it had my keys, it could come and go as it pleased. It could. "The tapes," I gasped, a sudden, desperate thought striking me. "Who made the tapes? Was it you?" The creature's shadowy face seemed to contort, the closest thing to an expression I'd seen yet. It might have been amusement, or contempt. "Tapes," it hissed. "Such quaint chronicles. We observe, we record, sometimes we share." "Why?" I demanded, struggling against its crushing grip. "Why us? Why show me?" "A courtesy to the new resident." Its grip tightened, and a searing pain shot through my shoulders. My vision started to blacken. "New resident?" I choked out. "This house," it rasped, its black eyes boring into mine. "It calls, it chooses. Soon, it will be my Tom's home." My Tom. Its Tom, not me. It was going to replace me. That was its goal. To take my place, my life, my family. The horror of it was absolute. I heard sirens in the distance, faint, but growing louder. Sarah must have been convincing on the phone. The creature heard them too. Its head snapped up, listening. The humming faltered slightly. For the first time, I sensed something other than contempt from it. A flicker of annoyance, caution. Interlopers, it hissed. It looked back at me, its black eyes burning with a cold fire. This is not finished. It shoved me hard. I stumbled back, crashing into the wall. My head struck the plaster with a sickening thud. Stars exploded behind my eyes. When my vision cleared, the creature was gone, vanished. The front door stood open, rain lashing into the hallway. The only sound was the approaching sirens, Ben's terrified sobs, and Sarah calling my name as she hurried down the stairs. I lay there, gasping for breath, my body aching, my mind reeling. It had gone, for now, but it had my keys, and it had promised to return. Sarah reached me, her face a mask of terror and relief. "Tom? Oh my God, Tom, are you okay? What was that thing?" She knelt beside me, her hands fluttering over me, checking for injuries. I think so," I managed, my voice hoarse. "Ben? Is Ben okay?" "He's terrified, but he's not hurt," she said, glancing back at our son, who was huddled on the sofa, watching us with wide, tear-filled eyes. The police arrived moments later, 2 officers, their faces grim as they took in the scene. The shattered door, the disarray, me slumped against the wall. Explaining what happened was difficult. How did you describe a creature that looked like you but wasn't, that hummed an unearthly tune and spoke in your distorted voice? I stuck to the basics: an intruder, a violent break in. I omitted the mimicry, the humming, the impossible nature of it. They wouldn't have believed me. They'd have thought I was crazy or on drugs. They took our statements. They searched the area. They found nothing. No footprints in the mud that didn't belong. No sign of forced entry other than the destroyed door. The creature had vanished as if it were never there. But it had been there. I had the bruises on my shoulders to prove it, and the chilling memory of its black eyes, its promise. This is not finished. And it had my keys. The police were professional, concerned, but clearly skeptical of the more bizarre elements I hinted at, but couldn't bring myself to fully articulate. They promised extra patrols. They helped us board up the broken door, and then they left. We were alone again, in our violated home. Sarah was shaken but incredibly strong. She focused on the kids, reassuring them, getting them settled back in their beds. Emily, roused by the commotion, was scared but seemed to be rallying, her fever having broken slightly during the chaos. Once the kids were asleep, or pretending to be, Sarah came back to me. We sat in the living room, the boarded-up door, a stark reminder of the night's terror. "Tom," she said, her voice quiet but firm, "you have to tell me what really happened. What was that thing, and why did it look like you?" I owed her the truth, or as much of it as I could make sense of. I took a deep breath, and I told her about the storage unit, about the tapes, about watching our future unfold, from the mundane morning to the horrifying attack. She listened, her face growing paler with each word. Disbelief warred with the undeniable terror of what she herself had witnessed from the top of the stairs. The creature, the humming, my distorted voice. When I finished, silence descended. She stared at me, her eyes wide, searching my face. I expected disbelief, accusations of insanity. Instead, she whispered, "The humming. I heard it, and its voice. It was you, but empty, horrible." She shuddered. "And it looked, God, Tom, it really looked like you." She believed me, or at least, she believed the evidence of her own senses, which aligned with my impossible story. "The tapes," she said, "the night tape. What did it show? After it broke in?" I hesitated. The image of the wrecked kitchen, the torn sweatshirt, the creature's hollow chuckle. I couldn't bring myself to describe it all. "It showed destruction," I said, my voice heavy. "It showed the creature, in the house, alone, and it had my keys." Her eyes widened in fresh horror. "Our keys? Your keys?" I nodded. "It took them from me tonight. During the fight, I didn't even realize it." "So, it can come back," she whispered. "It can just walk in." The fear was a living thing in the room with us. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Not tonight. We have to take the kids and go, to my sister's, somewhere safe." I agreed. This house was no longer a sanctuary, it was a target, and the creature had a key. We packed a few bags, quickly, quietly, trying not to wake the children more than necessary. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every creak of the house sounded like its returning footsteps. As we were about to leave, I remembered the tapes. They were still in my workshop. I couldn't leave them here. They were a curse, but they were also the only record, the only evidence of what we were facing. And the creature had called them quaint chronicles, had said, "We observe, we record, sometimes we share." It implied others, other tapes, other victims. I ran down to the workshop, grabbed the plastic container of tapes. As I did, my eyes fell on the handwritten labels again. October 15, morning, noon, afternoon, evening, night. But there was one tape I hadn't looked at closely before, pushed to the very bottom of the container, its label obscured. I pulled it out. The label was different, same blocky capitals, but it didn't have a date. It just said, "The House." My blood ran cold. The house. The creature had said, "This house. It calls. It chooses." What was on this tape? A history? An explanation? There was no time to watch it now. We had to leave. I grabbed it, stuffed it in the bag with the others. We crept out of the house, into the rainy night, looking over our shoulders with every step. My car, thankfully untouched in the driveway, felt like the only safe haven in the world. As I drove away from our home, from the boarded-up door and the darkened windows, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw a figure standing on the porch, a tall, shadowy silhouette, watching us leave. It could have been a trick of the rain and the darkness, or it could have been the creature. It's Tom, waiting. The night tape had shown a desolate, empty house, the creature in sole possession. My actions, my presence, had changed that. My family was alive, and we were escaping. We had survived the night of the tapes. But the creature was still out there. It had my keys, and it had said, "This is not finished." And now I had a new tape. The house. What secrets did it hold? What further horrors would it reveal? The fight was far from over. It felt like it was only just beginning. The tapes had shown me one future. I had altered it. But what new future were we heading towards now? And was the entity, the wrong Tom, part of a larger, more terrifying design connected to the house itself? The questions swirled in my exhausted mind, unanswered, ominous. We were safe for now, but the humming still echoed faintly in my memory, a promise of dread yet to come. The protective instinct that had driven me through the day was now hardening into a grim resolve. I had to understand this, to fight it, not just for my family, but for whatever sanity remained in a world where such things could exist.